Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of No Rocket Ships. I think we're somewhere around episode 8. This is somewhere around episode 8, but they might not go out in that order. Before we start, a quick thank you to our client, Patchworks, who are sponsoring this episode. We have a spooky relationship between our guest today and Patchworks, but we might go or might not go into that later on. And welcome to my guest, Luke Hodgson. Introduce yourself.
Hello, thanks for having me on. My name's Luke Hodgson. I am co-founder in a business called Commerce Thinking, which is an advisory practice to fast-growing brands, and also a co-founder in High Cohesion. Prior to that, I was a co-founder in Patchworks.
Which brings us all full circle back round. So we're not going to talk about Patchworks. The reason I've asked Luke on is we had a very interesting conversation earlier this year before I changed my own business structure quite considerably, about running a solid, profitable, good business that makes you happy and fulfills you. And we never really got to finish that conversation. So the first question I'm going to ask you, and these are short episodes, is what have you done to create a business that you now really enjoy running, and what's the journey been to get there?
I will try and answer that concisely, but it's a really, really important question that I don't think many founders of businesses ask themselves before they get going. So I had the advantage, right, of this not being my first business. I'd lived, got some lived experience of, I think, pursuing what most people do, which is got this great big idea, got these two guys that I want to build it with. We're going to create this thing and we're going to go and we're going to scale it to the moon. And that's where the whole rocket ship narrative comes from, right? And that's great, but it so rarely happens. And the reality of that is not always aligned to what you want. And I think what we realized through the experience then, and then leading into setting up Commerce Thinking, was that we all unconsciously subscribe to this definition of success that is imposed on us. And we don't really think about what is it that we want from our lives and from our businesses. And for us, we learnt the hard way and then had this chance to start again. So with Commerce Thinking, we set some really, really clear parameters up. And we said, like, this is a profit oriented business. It's not revenue, it's not headcount, it's not logo driven, it's profit oriented, which sounds pretty old school, but I think in our space, like you, Jamie, and I, like we share a lot of the same network. There's a lot of talk around, oh, what's your headcount, what's your revenue, and all these sorts of things. Very rarely are people saying, okay, what's your profit margin? What's that like? And how focused is that? But I think also being profit focused enables you to make decisions in a different way, and you come at things in a more balanced perspective. Adding headcount is not the enemy, but it does increase the level of risk and it does increase the level of stress because you've got someone's livelihood and their stability and their security reliant upon the success of the business. And what that leads to in practical reality is a bit of stress, but more often than not, I think it leads to people just compromising. They take revenue and business where they can because they've got this headcount and this hungry business that needs feeding. And what that means is that they compromise on the type of work that they do, the people that they work with, the projects that they say yes to. So I think what we've managed to do to a certain degree, like no business is ever going to be absolutely perfect. I'm sure they exist, but I think reality is no business is
They
ever going
only
to be
exist on
perfect.
LinkedIn, Luke. So they
Yeah,
only
of course. So yeah. Fair, 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 fair. But I think what we've managed to do is manage that balance really, really well, and say, actually, I've not seen another business in our space that can be as selective as us, that can be as kind of not uncompromising in like a dickhead way, but in a we know what we're really good at. We know the types of situations that we are best placed to kind of fill a gap in. We'll have the patience and the confidence to be able to wait for those factors to align before we pile in. And that is a massive liberation from chasing.
well, as somebody who started and ran a business actually from this very room for 10 years
Yeah,
on my own, happily, profit centered, I'm privately educated, 3 children, bought a house, bought more houses, it was profit driven for a long time, and then it wasn't. and it now is again. It's an interesting journey, right? Because you
Mm.
realize we work all day with people who work in businesses that will probably never make a profit, where people are waiting for an exit for 3 years, maybe 3 years too long, that never going to come. Somebody I know's just left a business, been in that business 8 years. The business has never made any money. It's a software vendor. It's never made a profit. They've left 8 years without any exit. Well, that's yeah. Anyway, so
Well, it's just like I think the the discourse is so dominated by outliers that it leads to us all thinking that anything is possible and that that big payout is going to come. And I still believe that that can happen, but it's not the only version of success. And I think that's the key thing that you want to try and encourage anyone who's aspiring to run a business is that, especially in the age of like technology and dare I say it because it's bounded around so much, but like you can do so much more with fewer heads than ever before.
you
There
did.
was never a better time to
No, you
start a
didn't use
very
the word.
small business.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And
It's
it's interesting, isn't it? I was reading the FT yesterday, and there was the thing that said AI is not delivering on investment yet. I mean, for fuck's sake, we've only just started.
yeah,
How is anybody expecting a return unless it's on a data center build at this point? Customers have no idea what to do with that tech. Most of them are trying to avoid using it at this point, avoid thinking about it because they've got other shit to do. I mean, Jesus, how is everybody thinking? Yeah, anyway. So what if I ask you about not the end game, but the plan for
mm,
commerce thinking? Is there a growth plan? Is there not a growth plan? What is the plan?
So the plan for commerce thinking, really since conception or inception, is that it would be an enabler for the high cohesion project, right? So high cohesion was always seen as the asset. It's this really valuable business that over time will get increasingly valuable. And commerce thinking was really an enabler for that in the early days. It was financing the initial build out. It was also ensuring that that business could experiment with kind of like its go to market strategy, and then once high cohesion was at a level of profitability, it was then self sufficient. So since that point, commerce thinking has really coexisted without a really clear growth agenda. It's been about, right, how do we make this business? How do we make this the most profitable with the lowest headcount possible business? That's the plan. And to put it into context, I drafted a job spec that we think we will launch towards the back end of this year for an anti growth and partnerships manager. Basically, they're going to be quoted on getting the most valuable partnerships from the fewest number of partners possible. And half jokingly saying, like, you're the first person to leave an event. Like these sorts of things where it's like by very nature of what we are doing and how we are doing it, we're trying to frame it differently. And we're all about value. We're all about saying, how can we create the longest standing, deepest relationships with potentially the fewest number of different people? And we think that going small but mega, mega valuable is our kind of winning tactic.
And
The
I
growth strategy, there isn't an exit plan,
no.
really. I love what we're doing. I can see myself doing this in some version in 10 years' time. Okay, great. Why change that?
Yes, but it was interesting. I mean, having been on a journey of running a business for 22 years, the first 10 years where I had no plan, strangely, were easily the most enjoyable because I had about 10 clients. That was the most I could manage at a time. We made great money. We did good work. I sat in this room and watched Sky Sports a lot of the day. I watched the Tour de France every year. I went out on my bike. I played with my kids.
Mm.
It was bloody great. As
You
soon
valued freedom, like
as
in
I,
the
as soon as I started,
hierarchy.
yeah, it was interesting. So, let's move on to talk about the client work, right? So I watched you moderate a session at Pulse. I now know a bit about what you know. I read your emails. I read an interesting article from you last week about demand planning. Now, my eldest son is currently working at Net-a-Porter, having just left uni, got a good degree, turned his life around, fantastic. Now he's dealing with logistics of inbound orders and therefore what might sell. And as we both know, it's a car crash. Not specifically in their business, but everywhere. Nobody's got any idea what's going to sell ever. And everybody always gets it wrong. Now, lots of AI businesses are talking about how they get it, how they can fix that. But you said you wrote something about it the other day. I just think it's interesting the sorts of things that you see based on the
Mm,
clients you work for.
mm.
What's the issue there? I mean, we all know what the issue is, but how could you give us 3 or 4 ways in which you can try to start to fix that problem?
Big question again, but it's like you're right. Like demand planning, merchandise planning is a very, very challenging thing that very, very few businesses do well. And I think one of the reasons that they don't do it well is that they don't really have the fundamentals in place to ever be able to do it well. So, one of the fundamentals is actually ensuring that a key business priority is buying everything that we can sell and selling everything that we can buy, which I know sounds like a mad thing to have to reiterate, but there are so many other metrics and so many other things that like abstract that. But really, you are in the business of manufacturing and building enough product that you can sell to a consumer that wants it and to sell through everything that you've bought. And I think a lot of things get in the way of that. So one is just like having that as a core thing and a KPI that you are tracking against and building some KPIs around that. I think the second thing is also to have like the kind of data fundamentals in place, which I know sounds a bit like a douchey phrase, but it's like one of the biggest gaps that brands have that prevent them from adopting some of these like AI powered merch planning tools is they don't actually have like a consistent hierarchy, an attribute model assigned to products from concept all the way through to purchasing them and all the way through to selling them. So what they find is that they've got these tools, but they keep pumping it with this different inconsistent data. So these tools are there to say, right, this product shares the same attributes from the same type of product a season before and a season before. It's got similar characteristics. We've profiled it based on previous season's performance and then your own forecast. Here's what we think you should be buying in terms of a size curve. Buy this many mediums, this many larges, this many XLs, and then these extreme sizes, these quantities. Those tools cannot do that kind of modeling if the ways in which you are profiling the products and the characteristics you're assigning to it aren't there or they're not consistent. Very few brands, it's there and consistent. So sorting that bit out is not sexy, but it's the only thing that will enable the sexiest stuff to happen. So I'm kind of answering this in the least techie way, but it genuinely is. It's mostly people, process, and the fundamentals
So
that's
it's not
missing.
yellow dress. You need to give the yellow dress much more detail than that to make it look.
Yeah.
Is it a length? Is it a weight? Is it a season? Is it, you need to know so that you can compare like for like or as close to like as you can. You need to know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest things that I keep calling out is um, there is so much attention and investment put into like marketing efficiency. And so there should be, right? Brands should be looking to make sure that every dollar, pound they spend on marketing, it's as effective at returning on that investment as possible. I think one of the reasons why that industry and that part of the industry has blown up to the extent it has is that the business models that support it are we will charge you a percentage of your ad spend, and then they've monetized it, which gives them loads of budget to market themselves, loads of budget to sponsor things, and then create all of this noise. You don't have that same business model in play in the supply chain side of the world. So there's just nowhere near as much noise, which I think leads to brands not giving it as much attention as they should. Imagine if you had the same kind of industry and the same kind of focus as like ROAS as there is in stock health. Like, how can you, like, if that wasn't the case and there was the same sort of incentives there, I think we'd see a lot more focus on it. I just don't think there is.
No, and well, I mean, you hear it all the time, that sort of housekeeping is not sexy, and it's the same as we found the same thing very, very definitely when Mac, the sort of Mac technology world came
Mm,
around, right? There was that weird period post-COVID where people had masses of cash to go and spend
mm,
on digital, I nearly said another word, spend on digital. Everything was going to be sold by digital. People had millions and tens of millions of pounds to go and do it with. But instead of fixing the leaking in the roof,
mm,
they went and built an extension. And
mm,
Mac was effectively, oh, let's go and do this other thing over here, and let's go and people spend huge amounts of money, and some of it paid back, and that's fine. But they didn't fix the hole in the roof at any
mm.
point. Nobody ever fixed the hole in the roof because it's sort of quite boring and very hard, and those resources weren't available, and it just, yeah, the incentive wasn't there to go and fix it.
Yeah, no, I can totally empathize with that and see it in some of the brands that we've worked with. Interesting though, like the whole headless Mac space, this kind of whole microservices architecture, there was so much noise around it. What's happened to it? Like, what do you see being the state of play for them now?
It's really interesting. Well, I'm right. I'm right in the middle of it. So I'm designing the agenda for MacX, which is the fifth of the conferences in October. I'm not that close to the organization anymore. But what's interesting when you speak to I care about customers, right? So if you go and talk to a big, like, billion and above dollar, euro business that's complicated and
Mm,
multinational, they really have to. I don't think that. I think they absolutely have to, and they all know they have to go down
mm,
a microservices API type program, and they all have, to a greater or less degree, whether they've kept Salesforce as the engine, or
mm,
to something else, or gone all in and sort of started trying to decompose the ERP. You have to go about it, and kind of go down some kind of Mac route. I haven't seen anybody else, Shopify included, get anywhere near that yet, right?
mm,
Shopify still really,
mm,
UK is still trying to win their first mid-market customer, 400 million pound customer.
mm,
Just can't see them. But equally, the noise around Mac has gone from being it's the answer to everything, to these projects are failing, to
mm,
actually these projects are starting not to fail, and we're getting an understanding of how we can do them better, and the SIs are getting stronger, and
mm.
it's just going through a sort of growing up phase. And I think you are seeing
Yeah.
some better projects. Interestingly, I heard about a large optical business last week, who had failed for 5 years to get Commerce Tools live, and I
Mm,
assumed that they would
mm.
fail for 5 years to get it live, but actually they've gone all in and are now they're now going to get it live and use it to do all of their unified store work as well. I mean,
Yeah.
huge. They're a £5 billion business. They have to use that tech. They
Yeah, no, and that is it's an interesting story and like anecdote because like we see a lot of pelters being thrown in the direction of like more traditional ERP systems, for example, and you will find a lot of cases where people have said, "Man, that was a really difficult, tricky project, and it didn't deliver," or "That was hard, but we got there in the end." You'll find a select few where they'll say, "Yeah, that was amazing, we delivered everything," and the thing is that just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not the right thing. Just some things are hard to do.
so
Like some
last
things are just
question. Yeah,
difficult to
yeah.
do.
So last question, right? So let me give you two examples of projects that I know have been, and I'm going to ask you, where do people really get it wrong, and what are the things you hear constantly? So one, Astrid and me, who told me last year, not going to go and buy an ERP because we haven't decided what sort of business we are yet. As soon as you buy an ERP, you're baking in some systems and they're not ready to bake yet. I thought that was a really interesting perspective. Bonus just sent NetSuite and Live using Patchworks, 5 years in the making, that project. And anything that takes 5 years is hard. So those two very different approaches, two businesses I really admire. Oliver Bonus is a fantastic business. I mean, really great. But I've always loved that brand, and the business is good. So what are the things? What are the things that people, in your view, clients don't think about enough, complain about the most? Do they all? Do you sit there all the time and go, okay, they've said the same thing as the last 15 customers that we've spoken to. They think this is the problem everybody thinks they're coming to us with, and it's not that problem, it's something else.
Yeah. Everyone says we're standard. So surely what we need is just ready and out of the box. Irrespective of system, that is the common phrase that you hear. Absolutely no business is standard in entirety. Every single business has nuance. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be successful. It's like what part of what makes you successful is you don't have the nuance. So stop trying to convince yourself that you're standard and that you'll get everything you need out of the box. You're asking to be lied to.
Or that you'll be able to change in order to
Yeah,
meet the demands of
correct,
whatever's out of the box.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. It's always a mix of the two. there's a level of process change and a level of business change, and there is a decent level of technical customization or configuration that's tailored to the business. And a lot of that will revolve around integration. So Hyperasian recently did a big project where the biggest nuance of the business was that they commonly do 200,000 orders in an hour when they drop new lines. Like, that is a big outlier. You are not going to get that without some really solid work and some really solid focus. So you've got to just be aware that you are going to have outliers, and not all of them will be that extreme. I think the other most common mistake slash sort of blind spot that we see is that brands completely underestimate how much time and energy big system changes take. And it doesn't matter what system change it is, and it doesn't matter what grade of system it is in terms of small, medium, enterprise grade, relative to your business size and the capacity that's available, they'll always underestimate how much demand it's going to place on their already stretched teams. And I know that sounds self-serving, but there's a reason I have a small, very profitable consulting business that fills that gap, because it exists all of the time. And the software vendors aren't geared up, and their business models don't allow them to fill it. And the brands don't have limitless resources, and they don't have these like spare people that they can just pull into projects.
And they don't have the skills, right? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
one of the reason that we're both in this world to a degree is that you've got non-expert sellers in software businesses selling to non-expert buyers with non-expert delivery teams. And
it's a really nice way of putting it.
And there is so much room for it all going horribly wrong. And therefore it does, right? People overpromise, everybody overpromises. One of the first episodes of this is with a guy called Dylan Valade, who was at Puma and Abbott and was part of the Mac crew. And I was asking him about mis-selling. And he said, yeah, you know, vendors missell all the time, but actually he said mis-selling occurs inside the business as well. You know, we overpromise what we can deliver all the time because we sort of have to, because if we don't, we make up the business case. There's a whole load of stuff that go, and everybody, you know, in the end that people sort of know it's going on, I suppose, but it doesn't often never get spoken about. But it's normalized.
And it also then vastly increases the chances of the project on reflection being deemed unsuccessful or a failure. But you're not actually saying that's not because we chose the wrong system or we chose the wrong partner. Might be we just set the expectations wrong at the beginning, and it's just going to take longer to get to this target state that we want to achieve. It's like a lot of this is just about educating, right? It's just about educating and setting those expectations right. And I know that sounds quite like a old-fashioned way of looking at it, but it's the truth, right? It doesn't mean it's any less true.
I had a very disappointing conversation a couple of years ago with the group CTO at Gymshark, who said to me, "Oh, because of the volume of business that we're doing, we're going to have to move off NetSuite and go and buy SAP." And I thought to myself, Jesus, honestly, really? You know, isn't there there must be something better for a business as young and dynamic as you. There must be something better than SAP. And yet maybe not, right? Maybe the grown-up nature, maybe they've just got to that level of revenue and volume where they just have to go into that. It's not like SAP or the devil. They're just been doing it at scale for a very long time.
Yeah, businesses will reach certain inflection points where its needs change, and those needs just become bigger, and therefore you need greater capabilities. And that point around Astra Mu, it's great. Like, we hear people stating similar things. The challenge back I would give is find me a retail brand that is in consumer product that doesn't need accurate actuals on everything related to inventory. Okay, at some point, you're going to want that in one place. It's like, I'm not Mr. ERP dogmatic, every brand needs it, but I haven't seen anything better when you reach a certain size and scale to just give you confidence that you've got accurate actuals for every transaction related to inventory. Yeah. Possibly the least sexy thing you will ever hear on your podcast, but...
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, you thought you might get fireworks, and I just drew off that with that.
No, you've given me dull. Right, Luke, we are out of time. I promised they would be quick, so this is 25 minutes of gold. And lovely to talk to you. And thank you very much for helping out today.
Thank you very much for having me on.